I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Water Memory is a new thriller out by Daniel Pyne, and it is published by Thomas and Mercer. In Water Memory, Black Ops specialist Aubrey Sentro may be one concussion away from death. But when Pirate sees the cargo ship she's on, she must decide whether to risk her life to save her fellow passengers. Centro's training takes over, and she's able to elude her captors, leaving bodies in her wake. But her problems are just getting started. Her memory lapses are getting more frequent, symptoms of serial-concussion syndrome. As she plays a deadly game of cat and mouse with the pirates, she pushes herself to survive by focusing on thoughts of her children. She's never told them what she really does for a living, and now she might not get the chance. While her memories make her vulnerable, motherhood makes her dangerous. Daniel Pyne was born in Chicago, raised in Colorado, educated at Stanford University, and now lives in Los Angeles and Santa Fe with his wife, brown dogs, fat cat, and an extremely sullen box turtle his grown children left in their wake. Among Pyne's film credits, his latest movie is called Backstabbing for Beginners. Pyne's television work spans from the seminal hipster cop show Miami Vice to the new Amazon TV series Bosch. Pyne has worked as a silkscreen printer, journalist, cartoonist, advertising copywriter, screenwriter, director, and occasionally teaches writing at UCLA's Graduate School of Film. His website is www.danielpyne, that's Pyne with a Y, Pyne.com.
Daniel, we very much enjoyed this book. We thought it was a very different setting for a mystery. I've never read one on a cargo ship before. Can you give us a little insight on what gave you the inspiration for writing this?
It was sort of two things. I had this character of Aubrey who I was carrying around, some kind of still young woman with adult children who has had a career as a black ops specialist, a kind of field agent, not a tradecraft agent, and the secrets, all the things that she carries, in addition to being compromised by exposure to concussive events, which I'd read about a lot in Afghanistan and Iraq, where these soldiers who really weren't injured in battle, but were near IEDs or near bombing sites, would over time suffer the same kind of concussion syndromes that football players get. So I had Aubrey wandering around. And then I was on a location scout on Manchurian Candidate with the cinematographer Tak Fujimoto. And he started telling me about what he'd been doing before he came to start working on the film. He'd taken a cruise on a cargo ship, and I was just fascinated by it. And he described how you get on this ship, and it's basically, there are maybe 7 other passengers. They have a few cabins for private passengers. It's not anything like one of these Carnival or Princess cruises. They do have the facilities that they have for the crew, and they have great food, and they have a gym. Some of them even have a pool, a little tiny swimming pool. But basically, you go on this trip to decompress, and it's really quiet. And he read a lot of books, and he could watch movies on his computer, or in the break room, they had a bunch of movies. And he talked to the other passengers and just chilled out. it occurred to me that putting Aubrey on that kind of cruise to try to get her mind straight, to try to just calm her life down, made sense. And then, of course, it's a cruise ship and piracy happens. What would happen if you had this special forces trained person on a ship that some mercenary amateur pirates try to take over? Certainly she'd want to stop them. So her life comes crashing back at her. They think they're going to have an easy mark, and it blows up on them as well.
Well, she truly fooled everybody. She fooled Fontaine.
Yeah. That's another thing I've been interested in. I'm a big fan of Le Carre. I also, when I was teaching screenwriting at UCLA not too long ago, I had a student who was the daughter of parents who were in the CIA. She was writing a script sort of about her experience. I was fascinated by what did they tell her and how much did she know and how much didn't she know, and were there kids who didn't know what their parents did? And I guess because she was in foreign postings over time as she got older, they told her, technically they can't tell anybody. Her parents really worried about it because if you tell your kids, then they're vulnerable because they know something that is valuable to an adversary and could be trouble for the parent and could be trouble for the family. So a lot of these kids didn't know what their parents do. And then I thought, well, how does that affect you growing up? If you find out, if you're Valerie Plame's daughter and you find out when it comes out in the New York Times that your mom is actually a CIA agent, got to blow your mind.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I just can't even imagine. My husband designs fire alarm systems for a lot of times government facilities, and he's actually designed some for the CIA. And when he goes in there, he says it's just amazing the protection that's in there and also the lack of information that you can gather from anything in there, like things on the wall that are blacked out and rooms. Like he had to go into this one room there. It's only a box in this room. He didn't know what he was designing the alarm for, but that it
was just a box.
It was just a box.
Well, and even I found out that even inside the CIA, there are things that they don't tell each other for obvious reasons. So that, there's firewalls between operations, and agents don't always share all the information because it's part of their protection. And it protects the person they're talking to because then they don't know what's going on. That's a weird world. It's a world of...
Does the U.S. have a Secrets Act like Great Britain does? Because I know some people cannot talk about anything until the day they die.
Yeah, there's a thing in the CIA. You sign that. And then when you leave the CIA, I forget what the term is. I think it's called rollback or something. When you leave the CIA, you can request a waiver where you can tell people, yeah, I worked in the CIA. But if you don't get it, you can never tell anyone that you worked in the CIA. And you can never talk about anything that happened till the day you die. It's a felony. It's a major crime.
Yeah.
Combining all those things was really where she developed. And then I did more and more research into brain injuries and serial concussions. The serial concussion part of it is really fascinating. It's not a very well understood phenomenon. It's not like Alzheimer's. They don't really understand it.
The one running theme that I got from reading the book was family dynamic. You wrote Aubrey as a strong female, but also a very damaged individual, especially when it came to relationships with her children and with her husband and with her parents. Did you have a real life inspiration for her, or is she completely fictional?
She's completely fictional. I have adult children. I raised 2 children with my wife. All writing is kind of personal on some level. So it always fascinated me the way people in my business, especially directors and producers, would leave their families, sometimes for 6 or 8 months at a time, in order to do their job. I watched what would happen to the family dynamic in that period and what their relationship was like with their children and how their children grew up differently than mine because I was around all the time. So that kind of interested me. And as I was building her character and exploring her, I've also been interested for a long time in gender roles and gender role reversal and expectations related to gender roles, probably because my father was a painter and a sculptor. He was a World War II veteran, so he comes out of the war and he needs to support his family, but he was really much more of a creative person. And my mother was actually the much stronger businesswoman. So watching their dynamic, I don't know, I tend to be a collector of random pieces of information. And then at some point, they come together and inform what I'm working on.
How difficult was it for you to write in a woman's voice?
You know, I tried to be really sensitive about it. I've written strong women before in film, and I was sensitive about it, but the way I looked at it was, rather than writing a archetypical woman, I wrote this woman with these characteristics. And I talked to my wife a lot about it, and to women writer friends about their issues and how they approach things maybe differently than I do. I like to think that a good writer can write in any voice if you dig deep enough. I admire Patricia Highsmith, who can write men as well as any man can. It was a challenge, but I enjoyed it. And I also like writing characters who are defying your expectations. So I liked all the surprises that she offered. And I liked her journey. It's a very sympathetic journey of self-discovery and forgiving herself, forgiving her children, realizing that she made the decisions she made. She doesn't regret them. What does that mean? You decide to take a certain career path and it requires certain things of you. You have to reconcile the consequences of that rather than just go through the rest of your life feeling guilty about it.
Well, she was also kind of haunted by her past.
And her
mother.
mother.
With her mother, she remembered bits and pieces as the story went along. It kind of
Well, I think that's what made the book so compelling. You got little bits and pieces of her past. You kind of knew where it was leading, but you needed to hear it from her. You needed for her to discover what happened to her. I really enjoyed how you wrote that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm like a junk collector. I read a lot and I talk to people. I collect pieces of their lives. And I know people who have gone through trauma and been damaged by it. And I know people who have gone through trauma like that and come out the other side of it stronger. And that sort of fascinates me. You know, what's the difference? And how did that then define who Aubrey was?
Another thing that I thought was pretty interesting in the book, Zola. I just thought it interesting that she seemed to be closer to him than she was her own children. The care she showed him was like, wow.
I was thinking about this phenomenon where sometimes grandparents are closer to their grandchildren. They have better relationships with their grandchildren than with their children because you're at a different point in your life when you encounter that situation again. And I feel like Aubrey is at a point in her life where she's relating to Zola in a different way than she might have related to her own kids. I mean, she had her kids when she was really, really young and still sorting out who she was and dealing with this very high pressure job that took her away a lot. She probably didn't feel as confident. And with Zola, it's a lot less self-conscious. I think she relates to him in a way because of the trauma that he's gone through and the life that he lived.
It surprised me in the book that Jeremy and Jenny, her children, they're sort of estranged from her, but boy, they dropped everything when Jeremy,
especially Jeremy.
Jeremy just said, okay, I'm going to get my mom. There was still that family connection there, even though she didn't feel it that much.
Yeah.
And they fought against it.
Yeah, it's that thing, right, with families. I suppose it depends on the family, but with this family, certainly they share qualities that she has, which is when it comes down to it, they'll step up. And Jeremy tries to step up and do a thing that he's really not very good at or prepared to do, but he's brave enough to do it because he has that thing that he inherited from her, which is to just go, to do the thing that has to be done.
And I think her daughter's a little older and just said, no, this is just mom.
I thought one part of the book where she found Dennis's things that he had done before he got sick, where he had bought all these penny stocks. And then Jenny blames her mother, saying that
Mom bought all